He is being so plain. He's being so honest, and they're just not grasping what this truly means. It's amazing to me that he's not like flipping tables in frustration at this point.
The Gospels tell the greatest story ever told. Jesus Christ, God become man who suffered and died to save us. But despite being a cradle Catholic, I've never read them all the way through, and that changes now. Join me as we journey through the life of our Savior, his words, his miracles, and his sacrifice like never before.
Today we read Matthew 19 and 20, and boy, oh boy, man, oh man, am I excited to get started. Oh, and don't mind the Christmas tree in the background. It stays up all year here. We're just a little bit lazy in this household, but that's okay. It looks pretty in the lighting, I suppose. And chapter 19, oh boy, it's about divorce. This feels very fitting. I'm currently engaged. We're getting married later this year. And so these are things that we've heard about during our marriage prep classes. But the way Jesus approaches divorce is very interesting and contrary to the way our society approaches divorce. Of course, it starts with the Pharisees yet again trying to trap him in his words, saying that his philosophy of divorce goes against what Moses' philosophy of divorce was. They're implying that he's going against God by saying what he's saying. Why did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to send her away? Jesus said to them, because of your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another, commits adultery. There's an emphasis here on becoming one skin, one flesh, one unit. We hear a lot like marriages are a team, but this is obviously taking that to the nth degree. And although I'm not married yet, I'm really embracing this concept of one flesh, one person. That's what a marriage is. And you can't just separate that because a man doesn't want to be with his wife anymore. And that's what Jesus is saying here. So the Pharisees are trying to trick him. They're trying to trap him. But yet again, he remains consistent about the hardness of our hearts. My parents are also divorced, and I'll spare you the details, but this is something that definitely hits close to home and something I bring with me and carry with me every single day, especially as I head into a marriage of my own. And it ends with a long story about a rich man who comes to Jesus and asks, how do I get into the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus says, obey the commandments, which he lists as you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The young man, of course, says, I do all that. So what else? What else do I have to do? He's like, all right, if you're perfect, go and sell everything you own and you will have treasure in heaven. The man walked away deep in sorrow, deep in sadness, for he had great possessions. But what Jesus says next is scary, interesting. I don't know how you want to perceive this. Truly, I say to you, only with difficulty will a rich person enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. Now, of course, the disciples were shocked hearing this. Astonished is the word that's used here, because they're like, okay, then who on earth could possibly be saved under these conditions? And Jesus says, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. I love that. I love that so much. Part of the reason Jesus is here, my understanding is that there's no possible way for us as humans, as flawed and broken humans, to live up to the way that God intended us to live. And that's why Jesus died on the cross for us, because we're gonna screw up. We're gonna sin. We're gonna do things wrong. We're going to disappoint God. But through him, all things are possible. And through Christ's death and resurrection on the cross, all of us are saved. Why doesn't any chapter of this just give us a break? I mean, everything is just so important. We don't get a breather at all, but that's what I love about this so much. Chapter 20 ends with Jesus healing 2 blind men. But I think it's what happens before that that's much more interesting. And it's not to say healing 2 blind men isn't interesting, but we've seen a lot of miracles so far. So each time he keeps doing a miracle, oh, this feels really weird to say. I don't know, I feel myself being less wowed by it. It's not that I'm not impressed with it. It's just that I have the full faith that he can do this if he so chooses. I think the beautiful part of each miracle is the faith of the believer. And that's what he always emphasizes. Anyways, I think the important part of this chapter is he also foretells his death a 3rd time in a specific paragraph. He's done it other times in parables and in other ways, but this is the 3rd time there's a completely separate paragraph about it. We also get another really interesting story about laborers in the vineyard, but I'll come back to that in a second, because first we have a mother's request. When the mother of the sons of Zebedee came up to him with her sons kneeling before him, she asked him for something. And he said to her, what do you want? She said to him, say that these 2 sons of mine are to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your kingdom. Jesus answered, you do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink from the cup that I am to drink? They said to him, we are able. But what he says next, I think, is the most important part of this. He said to them, you will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father. And when the 10 heard heard it, they were indignant at the two brothers. This is a very interesting request. A lot of the blame probably gets put on James and John's mom, but they're also just as, I guess, culpable in this. They don't understand what they're asking because they still have not grasped why Jesus is there, what he is to do. Even though he has foretold his death and resurrection 3 times in as plain language as it can possibly get, they clearly still don't understand. He says they're acting like Gentiles. Gentiles lord power and authority over one another, and that's not what this is about. Oi! I'm again, just like yesterday, I got frustrated reading that they weren't getting it. I thought all these stories before I really sat down and read this of the apostles not understanding it, it's because Jesus spoke only in parables and metaphors and you had to decipher it and it was difficult. He is being so plain. He's being so honest, and they're just not grasping what this truly means, why he's here, and what his purpose is. It's amazing to me that he's not flipping tables in frustration at this point, because this ends saying, even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Do you get it now? James and John, do you, sons of thunder? Oi! But also laborers in the vineyard. It's a very interesting metaphorical story. In summary, a bunch of day laborers, they agree to a day's work based on 1 denarii. They go out there, they're working all day in the sun. Then there are some other workers. They join in with, let's say, an hour left in the shift. When everyone goes to collect their wages, they all get paid the same amount. And the people who are out there all day are saying, what the heck, man? That's not fair. I worked all day in the sun and you're paying them the same amount. They worked 1/10 of the time that I did. But the master of the house is saying, we all agreed to a certain price, so it doesn't matter. And the question is he ripping off the people that worked extra long? Is it unfair on a surface level? Probably. Did they also all agree to it? Yes. But this feels like a metaphor for the person who lives their life in sin, maybe lives their life in ignorance or arrogance, however you want to look at it. And there's this common feeling or sentiment out there. I know before I came back to the church, I had this of how could someone live an entire life of sin and gluttony and hedonism and then on their deathbed decide to accept Jesus Christ and then suddenly be saved? This is a really tough thing to grapple with. I still don't know if I have fully grappled with this. But if we remember back yesterday to that parable of the lost sheep, just like the shepherd going after the one lost, God will always go after the one lost sheep. And to him, finding that one lost sheep may feel even greater than the 99 who never went astray. We don't get to decide what the reward is for following him for an entire lifetime. We don't get to decide what the reward or punishment would be for not following him for a lifetime and then following him right before our death. I mean, it's quite a gamble. You don't know when or how you're gonna die, but I digress. Now he ends this saying, so the last will be first and the first last. And this is the second time in these 2 chapters that he ends a paragraph that way. But it's also the 20th time in all of Matthew that they've ended a paragraph that way. And I'm not really sure how to interpret that. So I'm curious, open question to you guys, if you have a better understanding of the sentence, so the last will be first and the first last, please drop them down in the comments below. I'd love to hear more interpretations or context for that because it's been repeated so many. And it's like when the teacher says something 20 times and you know it's going to be on the test. Not that this is a test, but you get my point. Let me know down in the comments below. But that is 19 and 20. I hope you all enjoyed 21, 22, and 23 tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to it. Make sure you subscribed and I'll see you guys tomorrow.